Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. This is the first in a sort of mini series. I don't know how long it'll go on for. Just back to basics. I appreciate that not everybody's been growing orchids for 20 years. I appreciate that not everybody has a collection of many and varied different types of orchids. Some may have just a couple on a windowsill, or on a table near a window or something. So not everybody watching is what I would call an experienced grower. And experienced or not, I still see this subject messed up even by experienced growers. And it's basically a requested video. Several people have requested it over a while, but one relatively recently which just sort of gave me a kick up the whatnot to get it done. And that's basically what it says on your label, the naming standards, the names of our orchids, and how those names are written tells you things. Yeah? So I'll have to do this with pop-ups, and I'll imagine the pop-up because I can't see them, I haven't done them yet. This is going to get complicated and might get a bit flustery in places, but we'll start off with the basics. Orchids in the wild are species, and occasionally there are hybrids in the wild. Because they are made up of species, they tend to be primary crosses, which means it's two species, often very closely related, that have pollinated across themselves and produced a hybrid in the wild. Normally a primary cross. Primary cross merely means two species. So they produced the hybrid, there wasn't any other hybrids involved. It's very rare for that to subsequently happen in the wild, where you get a primary cross then crosses with another species. That's quite rare. I have not come across it, but I can imagine it could possibly happen. So normally when you get an orchid tag, orchid label, it'll have two words on it. It'll have the genus, this is the type of orchid, examples like Cattleya, Oncidium, Dendrobium, Masdevallia, Coelogene. Those are all genera. They each can represent a genus. Yeah? So that's the main category. The second word can be either a species or a hybrid name. Yeah? It can be either. Well, how am I supposed to tell the difference then? Well, that's quite easy. It's the way it should be written. Nurseries will not obey these rules, despite the fact they know them. I don't obey these rules on my tags, and it may be that both of us, nurseries and me, are using the same excuse. And the excuse is, my label maker does nice upright characters, but it does not do italics very nicely. They look awful. So I don't use italics. Now, strictly speaking, the genus should always be in italics and start with a capital letter. Yeah? If it's a species, it should also be in italics and it should start with a lowercase letter. So our first example here is how a species should be written. Yeah, so you can see italics with a capital letter for the genus, and all italics and lowercase for the actual type of orchid, the species identity. So that's a species. What about a hybrid then? Well, the genus remains the same. That should still be in italics. It won't be coming from a nursery, I can virtually guarantee it, but it should be. These are standards that should be stuck to. So the genus name would be in italics, starting with a capital letter. The hybrid name will be in non-italics, starting with a capital letter as well. Now you can see the difference. I'll put the two together, so we've got species and now we've got hybrid. Those are the two simplistic forms of how orchid names should be written. They won't always look like that. As I said, an awful lot of the time I've seen nurseries put a species name with a capital letter when it shouldn't be. I've seen species that should all be in italics, all in upright, non-italics. So you will come across these incorrectly named. I'm just saying how it should be, and that's not necessarily even how I do it. I do on my pop-ups, yeah? So when I'm, saying what an orchid is in my videos, my pop-ups with the name will be correctly written, but my tags aren't, because as I said, my label maker does absolutely lousy italics. Look like hieroglyphics, got a job to read them. Right, so that's the two simplistic forms. Next, you will get varieties. So this is where you will get a genus, and then a species or a hybrid name, and the word variety, or often mainly shortened to VAR. It should also have a full stop if it's VAR. And then you will get another name. And this is where seedlings have been produced, and some of them have been a bit better than others, and they've been registered as a special type. This will also be shown in a different way, where you've got your genus followed by your hybrid name, followed by some words in single quotes, not double quotes, single quotes. And that's the named variety without the word var. It's not necessarily, most people leave it out. So this is where we're now getting into named hybrids. So we've got our genus and our hybrid name, the actual name that the orchid's been given, because don't forget this very rarely occurs in the wild. They're written differently. And then this was a special one, like it might just be the colour. So it might be, genus, hybrid name, and red in quotes, because that's the name it was given when it was registered. So you can get types. So you've got genus, orchid name, type, yeah? If this was a naturally occurring hybrid that occurs in the wild, that's written slightly differently, and I very rarely see it written properly, as it should be. So we've now got our genus name, all in italics, starting with a capital letter, as always. That doesn't change, that stays the same. And then we've got our hybrid name, but this is two species from the wild, yeah? So it can occur in the wild. This is a naturally occurring hybrid, and it needs an X in front, yeah? So that doesn't mean it's a cross. It does, it implies it's a cross, hence the X. But then the name will be in italics, all in lowercase. So like a species name, but with the X in front of it to signify it's a hybrid naturally occurring in the wild. So those are examples of what it can say on your tag. You will sometimes see some letters following on. Let's just see if I've got one. No. I mean, this name here, let me put my beer down, run out of wine. Disgraceful. It's a hanging offence. So if you look at this one, this tag. There's quite a lot of writing there. Now, irrespective of the italics are missing, because I can't do that, the first word, dendrobium, should be in italics with a capital D. That's how it should be set, thing. And then this is a hybrid. And the first part of that hybrid is also a hybrid. And it's called Aussie's Sweetness. Yeah? But Aussie's Sweetness, a hybrid, hence capital letters, upright letters. It's then got an X to signify it's been crossed with, and then it's Tepiniense. And that has got a small t, which means it's a species, and it should be in italics. So if this was written properly, the word dendrobium and Tepiniense should both be in italics. Dendrobium with a capital D, the species with a lowercase t. And then the other part of the name, Aussie's Sweetness, upright letters, non-italics with capital letters. So that's a slightly more complex hybrid. And if you were making your notes, what it would be nice to do would be to then elaborate on what Aussie Sweetness is made of, because that's a hybrid. So there's two names have gone into making that up. So in your notes you could try and find out what went into that, which could also be two hybrids crossed together to make Aussie Sweetness. Well, you've now got 4 plants involved in that one name. It can get complicated. Where the hell did that come from? There. But yes, I mean, here's an example of a tag that you will typically get from a nursery that's just completely incorrect, because both the genus and the hybrid name have been written in capital letters. Totally incorrect. Yeah? Because the genus Oncidium should be capital O and then lowercase and all in italics, and then the Cheyenne part should be a capital C and all the rest lowercase in non-italics. So that's come from a nursery and it's been completely written wrong. And that's what they do. They are a nuisance, and they can mess you about. Even Burnhams do it wrong. Yeah? Prosthetia radiata, that's a species. Every bit of that should be in italics, and the only capital letter should be the P at the front of Prosthetia. But I suspect Sarah's in the same boat as me. The label maker does crappy italics, so they don't use it. But their label maker does do lowercase. Yeah. So, naming standards. And we won't get me properly started on the subject, but we then get into intergenerics. And this is where orchids of different genera are crossed together. So you could get like a Brassia crossed with a Miltonia. These are genera in their own right, and they have quite a few species within those genera in their own right. But they've been crossed together to form an intergeneric. So it's 2 different types of orchids crossed together, obviously to form a hybrid. And those are given names to represent the component parts. So like a Brassia crossed with a Miltonia would be a Bratonia. Some of them are obvious, some of them not so much. Now that's simplistic. The problem you will get is that there are Miltonias and Miltoniopsis, and they are quite different. And in the past, intergenerics using those have often started with milt. Well, which one is that supposed to be? Yeah? So, You've got to be careful, and the people who generate these names, the hybridizers, need to go careful. The problem is in the Cattleya Alliance and the Oncidium Alliance, there is an incredible amount of reclassification that's been going on for the last 20, 30, possibly even 40 years. And I think they are sponsored by label makers, because it means as fast as you do your label, you go out for a coffee, you come back out and the name's changed. It can get on your thrupneys. It's a polite version, might be ladies around. But yes, you will get intergeneric names, and they can not only be 2, they can be 3, 4, I think it can even go to 5, yeah? And this is where you might get something like a Miltonia crossed with an Oncidium, and then that hybrid is then crossed with a Brassia. So it's got 3 individual types of orchids in that more complex hybrid. But with the classifications, it makes, certainly in some of the reclassifications, it makes a mockery of those intergeneric names. If you take the Cattleya Alliance, the Sophronites have been reclassified as Cattleyas. Quite a lot of the Laelias have been reclassified as Cattleyas. Some of the Cattleyas have been reclassified as something entirely different, made up new names over the last 20 odd years. So you've now got a genus that didn't exist 20, 30 years ago. And it's now got some of the Cattleyas in it. Things like this are going on all the time. But you used to see hybrids starting with SLC, and you thought, oh, I know what that is. That's a Sophronitis, a Laelia and a Cattleya combined together to give this hybrid, SLC. Well, the Sophronitis have been classified as Cattleyas now. A lot of the Laelias have been classified as Cattleyas. So it's now a Cattleya, Cattleya, Cattleya. It's just silly, isn't it? It's just a Cattleya. And all of its component parts have just been lost. So the history of what made up this hybrid has just been wiped out by the reclassification process. And the worst one of the lot, there's articles have been written, people have put bits in magazines and all sorts, is in the Oncidium Alliance. You've got the odontoglossums. These grow quite different to most of the other types in the Oncidium Alliance. They come from very high up, often in cloud forests. They're cool growers. They do grow quite differently to some of their lowland counterparts like the Brassias and Miltonias. Now, Miltoniopsis grow up where the odontoglossums do. I don't think, not necessarily in the same part of the world, but up at the same sort of elevations. So very cool, very fresh air, lots of mist and cloud, different type of growth altogether. And the odontoglossums were often crossed with Oncidiums. So you get an odontocidium. And then they reclassified the odontoglossums as Oncidiums. So that became an Oncidium, now just called Oncidium. You've lost the history. Yeah, you see what's happened just by reclassifying. When you buy your plant and it says Oncidium naevium, for instance, a species, you've lost the fact that that was once odontoglossum and is a cool grower and needs quite specialish care compared with an ordinary Oncidium. So the reclassification has lost the history of the original classification when it was first described in 18 something or other. So there we go. Naming. It is mainly straightforward. And then you will have to bear in mind that those of you that have only got a few orchids have probably got Phalaenopsis orchids. And I can quite safely say that most of the Phalaenopsis orchids you're going to buy from the likes of garden centres, supermarkets, places like that, you know, your local garage, practically anywhere you go you'll find orchids for sale nowadays. Most of those are mass produced in Germany and Holland or places like that, they are not named. They're just a hybrid. They don't have a registered name. And a lot of the reasoning behind that is the people that produce these hybrids, there's a lot of skill and time involved with producing these hybrids, and when they get a good one, it's mass produced, it's cloned to flood the market with this new lovely bright colour that they've got. Well, if they register it, they've just told all the other nurseries how to make it, what went into it. So it's not unique to them anymore. So they don't register it, they don't tell you what's in it, and they don't, if they give it a name, it's what I call a trade name. It's a made up name that means nothing. So there's that. And a lot of the orchids you get in the Oncidium intergeneric range that you can find in supermarkets occasionally and garden centres, they probably won't have a proper name. They may have a trade name. They might not even have the word orchid on the label. It might just say houseplant. It can be that bad. But anyway, standard naming is pretty straightforward, and just by having a little bit of knowledge you can understand what your label is telling you, whether this is a more complex hybrid. The giveaway for the intergenerics is the word that should be the genus is made up. It isn't real. It doesn't exist in the natural world. It's been made up in the world of hybridization. Yeah, because Brassia and Miltonia, for instance, would probably not be anywhere near each other in the wild and are not going to mix. So a Bratonia would not exist in the wild. So it's a non-real genus. It's been made up. However, the Brassias, that's a genuine genus. You can go out into the wild and see Brassias growing. If you're lucky, if they haven't all been stripped out of the jungle. So there we go. A chat about names. Genus first, followed by either species or hybrid, can then be followed by some words in quotes. Variety name. Oh, I've got to find one. I want to show these things, didn't I? This should be easy, shouldn't it? Yeah, it should be. The trouble is there's still quite a few plants that haven't got my label in. They've got somebody else's. Where would I find one? Well, I can find you a wrong one. I can find you a bad one. That was easy enough. Yeah, there seems to be quite a few of my labels have gone missing. So I'm just picking up a few examples. That's not one of mine, is it? No, that's another wrong one. I'm trying to find a right one. I'm trying to find one that's actually been written correctly. I'm having trouble here. Aha! God, these labels are fading badly. I've got to go and put all these back when I've finished. Right, here's an example of quite a complex hybrid with its name nearly written properly. So you're going to have a job to read this because it's faded. What you're looking at is the genus is Cattleya. That should be in italics. That's all on this label that should be in italics. So capital C, but the word Cattleya should be in italics. And then we've got Siang Yu Red Pearl. That's the name of this Cattleya hybrid. But this version of this Cattleya hybrid is called Red Dragonfly, and Red Dragonfly is in single quotes. So all of the words start with capital letters. The genus always does anyway. And hybrid words, whatever the reason they're there, start with capital letters followed by lowercase, all in non-italics. Yeah, so that's a more complex tag. But all it's doing is saying that this Cattleya was registered as Cyan Red Pearl, but this one was a bit special and we called it Red Dragonfly. So that bit goes in quotes. You will find others. You will find others that are called Cattleya Cyan Red Pearl that are not called Red Dragonfly. They might be called Pink Dragonfly or something entirely different, but that bit goes in quotes to differentiate. So that's an example of that. This is an example, again, the dendrobium should be in italics with a capital D, and then all the rest, nearly all the rest. Then we've got Gerac Spider is the hybrid name, but that's been crossed with a dendrobium species, which is discolor. So discolor should be in italics, starting with lower case to signify it's a species. So that would be a dendrobium hybrid crossed with the species. That's come from somebody I know quite well who should know better, but again has probably got a label maker that doesn't do italics. That's an Encyclia, and that's Shin Fong Thomas. And Encyclia should be in italics. It's not, but it should be. That's just a standard hybrid. Another one, Oncidium Tahitian Dancer. Standard hybrid, Oncidium should be in italics. And then this one, Avanagara Apple Blossom. Avanagara was like a subset of the Cattleyas that were just separated out and given that name. They've since been reclassified as something entirely different. But when this cross first came onto the market, beautiful freesia fragrance, beautiful coloured blooms, a very, very nice Cattleya type to own. And it was very popular and for a while quite easy to get hold of. They're like gold dust now trying to get hold of these because the cross hasn't been produced, hasn't been reproduced. So they've all left the nurseries, they've all been bought up, gone into private collections. Probably a lot of them have died, but you've got a job to get hold of this now. But there are quite a few different types of apple blossom, and the different types would be in quotes after apple blossom. But as I said, Avanagara is what it was first registered as, very popular under that name. Its new name, people probably wouldn't even recognise. So there we go. So a chat about names, and you will get some nurseries have such a big catalogue that to document their plants around the nursery they're just given a number and they have to go and look it up in their big index to find out what that number means. They shouldn't really be selling anything to you with the number on it. They should give you a proper label, and if you ask a nursery like that goes to that extent, if you ask, they will look it up and probably do you a proper label before you leave with your plant. That happens at the Mathers Foundation. Some of their plants are up for sale without a label in, they've just got the catalogue number. Oh, let me let that noisy in. What's that, the sun gone in, has it? Oh. Yeah, not so warm now. Noisy cat. Anyway, so that's a chat about names. Most of you, well, I say most of you, perhaps not, but many of you will know all about that anyway. Sometimes it's nice to have a little refresher, perhaps. And to some of you that might be just what you wanted, an explanation of what's on your labels on your orchids. But as I said, just remember that the nurseries are often writing the labels incorrectly in the format that they write them in, not the actual words. I'm sure they are telling you what the genus is correctly, and if it's a hybrid or species, what that name actually is. They may not have written it in the right format, but they'd have given you the right words. And if you don't know what it is, I mean, I've got some here, the Dendrobium hybrid. I don't know what it is. It was bought without a label, or in one case given to me without a label. I don't know what it is. You can hazard a guess, but you'll often guess wrong. So there we go, that's that. You will also get misconstrued names via YouTube, where you'll get perhaps quite a popular channel that says a hybrid name incorrectly, and then other people copy it. Oncidium Sherry Baby, not Sherry Baby. It's got nothing to do with drink at all. It's Sherry with an A, Sherry Baby. And I've seen that written and heard it said so many times incorrectly. You can sort of see why, because sherry isn't a proper word, is it? Whereas sherry is. I'm sure some of you have given it that last thing at night for medicinal reasons, of course. But yeah, it's Sherry Baby, and you know, you've got to go careful. So there we go, some names. And I'd like to do a back to basics video, certainly through the rest of the summer period, because quite honestly there's not much going on to film. Tomorrow's the 8th, so we will be doing everything in bud, bloom and spike. That's a regular monthly event, so that's one for tomorrow. But any ideas of subject matter for the back to basics ones? So these need to be things generally aimed at beginners, new people to orchids, people that haven't been growing that long, or people that want to venture out into other genera from perhaps just Phalaenopsis. They'd like to have a go at something else, but they want to start from the beginning. They don't want to come in, you know, sploop deep end, straight down there. They want to come in gently, going up the steps to the 2 foot board, not the 10 metre board sort of thing. So any ideas will be appreciated, and you know, we'll do something towards the beginner's end. I'm not going to call it a beginner's series, because it's not the same as what other people are doing necessarily. So some ideas would be appreciated, and something like this, you know, going over the way that labels should be written and what they mean. You know, it was asked for, it's been done. If you don't ask, you don't get. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.